Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, strange sci-fi and wartime shenanigans. It's my weekly wrap-up. Okay, so I'm filming this slightly earlier than usual. I normally film these on a Saturday morning. I've got a busy Saturday ahead, so I'm actually filming this Friday evening. And I've got 4 books to talk to you about today that I've finished this week. So not a fantastic week. It's been a very, very busy week, and I haven't got quite as much reading done as I would have liked to have done. But I've read 4 interesting books, which I will talk to you about. Got a couple of things on the go at the moment as well, which I'll mention. And then I'll do a little bit about what's been on the channel in the last week. And I'll try and talk about what's going to be on the channel in the next week, but I don't really know. I'm a bit behind with my channel planning as well as my reading. But before I start, let me show you the t-shirt I'm wearing today. So I showed you last week in this video my Midnight Magazine t-shirt. So today I'm wearing my Bookworm t-shirt. So this was made by Lydia from the channel Typical Books, a fantastic horror channel on BookTube. So Lydia's got a store and she makes various things with this Bookworm logo on it, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So I really do like this t-shirt. And Lydia's channel is definitely worth checking out. I will leave a link to it in the description for the video. Right, so let's talk about what I've read this week then. So the first thing I read this week was a book called Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovksy, which was my patron's pick for our Patreon book club this month. And I quite like this, but I didn't love it. I think my patrons who read it liked it more than me. So it's kind of one of those books that feels like a blend of science fiction and fantasy. It's about this kind of strange alien society which has a definite fantasy vibe to it, and this guy who is there to basically observe the planet and make sure nothing goes wrong, but who is from a more technologically advanced society than the people on the planet, and it ends up kind of being a bit of a quest type story. So it was interesting, but I did struggle with it a bit when I was reading it, and I don't know if I'm a bit slumpy this week because I have struggled with another book, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. But I felt like I really struggled to get into the sci-fi elements of it, and I think it's been a while since I've read a lot of sci-fi. I used to read loads of it when I was a teenager, and as I've grown older I find it less appealing, and I think I find a bit of a blocker getting into sci-fi sometimes because of that need to figure out, the society you're reading about and the technology you're reading about, and how things fit together. I think sometimes I struggle a bit with that, but overall I thought the story was good. I thought Adrian Tchaikovsky's writing was interesting. The 2 main characters are really entertaining, so there was a lot to enjoy there, but it just didn't quite click with me in the way that it did with some of the other people who read it. Moving on then, so also read this Circle of Animals by Victor Malone, which is a self-published book. So Victor, the author, sent me a copy of it. This was interesting. Again, it didn't quite click with me, but I did think it was an interesting book. So it's basically it's a thriller about a kind of low-level criminal who's pissed off the wrong people basically, and gets dragged to this remote farmhouse and tortured effectively. But the story is told as a stream of consciousness as he tries to figure out what's going on with him. So it's quite overwhelming at times, I think deliberately, in terms of just being a constant download of his thoughts. And he's not a terribly nice guy, so some of his thoughts aren't particularly nice thoughts. And the book is basically just one long block of text. So it's definitely different from a lot of the stuff I read. And I did struggle with it a little bit at times, but I thought it was, definitely an interesting read. And if you fancy something a bit experimental like that, it's worth checking out. Also read then in my ongoing my ongoing project to read Patricia Highsmith, which I'm doing with Anne from the channel Anne Novella. So this month we read The Two Faces of January, which was not one of Highsmith's best. So I did give it 4 stars, but that was probably a slightly generous 4 stars, probably more like 3.5. So this is a book about a couple an American couple who are in Greece, traveling around, and the guy is kind of a con man, and he gets caught out and ends up like killing someone, and they then go on the run. But they meet right after this crime has happened. They meet this other young American guy who's out there, who ends up kind of tagging along with them. So it's kind of quite typical Highsmith in terms of largely being about the relationship between these two guys, the older guy who's the killer and this younger guy who ends up involved with the couple. It's got more of a traditional thriller setup in that you've got this killing right at the start, and you know the kind of the killer trying to evade the authorities. But it felt like some of Highsmith's books do. It felt like it lost its way a little bit in the second half. I really liked the very ending, but there was definitely a slightly flabby middle, shall we say, which I didn't enjoy quite as much. So not one of her best, but still some really solid writing in there. And then I've just finished a book I really, really enjoyed. So a book that was sent to me by the publisher. The publisher is Neotext, and the book is a book called Fancy Anders Goes to War, Who Killed Rosie the Riveter? And it's by Max Allan Collins with illustrations by Faye Dalton. So I read this for BookTube at War, and it was fun and interesting. So unlike the other books I've read so far for BookTube at War, which have been set very much, kind of in the war zone, if you like. So I read that Sven Hassel book, and I read the first of the Fox series of books. So both with kind of battle scenes and things like that. This is a murder mystery set in the USA, so set in Los Angeles in 1942, but very much around kind of the home front effort to support the war. So follows this young woman, Fancy Anders, who's a detective, or a wannabe detective, who ends up working in a factory that's making bombers. And it was very much, it was a really interesting reflection on that kind of existence in America at the time, shortly after Pearl Harbor. So where, the female workforce and people who weren't typically invited into the workforce, should we say, so women and ethnic minorities, all of a sudden, huge demand for their labour. So that the reflection on that was really interesting. Fancy Anders herself is a really great character, so kind of feisty young woman. And the actual murder mystery wasn't fantastic, but it was interesting enough. But really, it's the kind of humour and period feel and that kind of detail about the what existence was like in America during the 40s, during the war, that was really interesting. And then some fantastic kind of vintage pulpy cheesecake style illustrations from Faye Dalton as well throughout the book. So you get one at the end of every chapter. Really made it a really fun and engaging and just an enjoyable and interesting read. Max Allan Collins, I've read a couple of things by in the past and quite enjoyed. He's written absolutely tons of stuff. So he does a lot of stuff for Hard Case Crime. I think he's involved in doing kind of pastiches of Mickey Spillane books, and is doing this. I'm not sure if there's going to be other books in the Fancy Anders series, but if there are, I would definitely read them because I thought she was a really, really engaging character. So only a short novel, I mean probably a novella really. I think it was just over 100 pages, but definitely recommend it if you fancy a lighter murder mystery with some enjoyable period detail. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Currently reading then a few things. So I'm reading volume 8 of Berserk in this huge and very heavy volume. So I need to get back to that and get it finished. I'm reading, sorry, I've not organised my books very well for this. So I'm reading The Neon Rain by James Lee Burke, which is the first of the Dave Robichaud, I might be pronouncing that name wrongly, Dave Robichaud, I don't know. Anyway, the first of James Lee Burke's long-running series about a detective in New Orleans. So I'm enjoying this, but I am finding the prose quite hard going. It's like there's loads of detail in there. and you really have to pay attention to every word, which for kind of a detective novel is not necessarily something I'm used to. So definitely enjoying it, but it's been slower going than I expected it to be. So reading that as well, and then also reading on my iPad Charlie's War by Pat Mills and Joe Colquhoun. So volume 1 of that. So this is a British comic strip from I think it was from the 80s originally, and I think it was originally published in a comic over here called Battle. Pat Mills is one of my favourite comic book writers, and this is really, really good. So it's about a young teenager who's drafted, basically signs up to fight in the First World War, lying about his age. And he's a really interesting character, Charlie, because he's not very bright, and a lot is made of that. But he's always trying to do the right thing. So he's a really engaging hero, and the depiction of life in the trenches feels, it's quite brutal and feels more realistic than you'd expect in a British comic from the 80s. So really, really well done. Very impressed with it so far, and hoping to get that finished probably this weekend, along with Berserk and the James Lee Burke book. And then the next novel I'll be reading, sorry, again, not very well prepared, is this. The Unknown Ajax by Georgette Heyer, which I'm doing a buddy read of with one of my patrons, Heidi. So Heidi sent me this recently, along with a bunch of other stuff. Looking forward to reading a bit of kind of historical romance. So that's the book stuff out of the way. In terms of channel stuff, so a few videos in the last week that I'm quite pleased with, to be honest with you. So I did my 25,000 subscribers Q&A video. I did a video about the book Noticed by Heather Lewis and the fact that a new edition is being published, which is fantastic news. I did the Garb August Truth or Dare tag, which was very silly, very rude, and I had a lot of fun doing. And then also did a June wrap up and a book haul. In the week ahead, I don't really know. As I said earlier, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I've filmed a video about the Garb August Garb Bingo card with suggestions for books people might want to read to fulfil the different squares on the bingo card, including for most of the squares books from Kindle Unlimited. I've got that going up, but aside from that, I haven't got anything at all planned. And as I say, I've got quite a busy weekend, so it might be a bit of a rush to get stuff done for next week, but we'll see how I get on. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about. Let me know what you've been reading this week. Do check out Lydia's channel and her store. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.